The village of Kwalu lay nestled between towering baobab trees, their twisted roots gripping the earth like the hands of the ancestors. The wind carried the whispers of spirits, weaving them into the rustling leaves and the distant calls of night creatures. Here, tradition was not just a way of life, it was the very air the villagers breathed. Men were hunters, their spears sharp and their gazes sharper. Women were brides, their futures bound to the hearth. And the elders, the keepers of law, ensured that none strayed from the path set by those who came before. Beneath the heavy sky, a young girl sat at the edge of the village, watching as the men prepared for the hunt. Adanna, barely 12, clutched the hem of her worn tunic, her dark eyes filled with something rarely seen in a girl: hunger. Not for food, but for knowledge. She had heard the traders speak of a place beyond the forests, a place where children, boys and girls, were taught to read the words of the wind and the stars. The thought made her heart pound like the village drums, but she knew such dreams were forbidden. A girl had no need for the wisdom of scrolls when she had the wisdom of the hearth. Inside their hut, Baba sat in silence, sharpening his spear. His strong hands moved with practiced ease, but his mind was troubled. He had seen the way Adanna watched the traders, how her eyes gleamed at the mention of the distant school. She was not like the other girls, content with pounding yams and fetching water. He had tried to silence her questions, but they bubbled forth like a river in the rainy season. His own father had taught him that to stray from tradition was to anger the ancestors. Yet in the quiet of his heart, he wondered, was the world changing? By the fire, Neka, the village storyteller and keeper of secrets, wove her tales with a voice thick with mystery. Though her bones were frail, her spirit was strong. She knew that change was coming, as surely as she knew the elders would resist it. One night, as the fire crackled and the shadows danced, she pulled Adanna close and whispered, "A closed mind breeds storms, child." The spirits speak in many ways, but not all listen. In the shadows, Kofi listened too, his face twisted with resentment. Adanna was different, and different was dangerous. He had seen how the villagers began to look at her, their whispers turning to murmurs, their murmurs to fear. It was Kofi who first planted the seed of suspicion. "She speaks to spirits," he told them. "She is cursed." And like dry grass before a flame, the rumors spread. One evening, as the village drums echoed against the night sky, Adanna knelt before Baba, her small hands trembling. "Let me learn, Baba," she pleaded. "The world is bigger than Kwalu. The traders speak of places where girls are taught to read." The air grew heavy. The fire crackled between them, casting long shadows on Baba's face. His jaw tightened, his grip on his spear firm. "You ask for disgrace," he said at last, his voice low and unyielding. "A girl who abandons her place calls upon the wrath of the ancestors. You will speak no more of this." Word of Adanna's defiance spread like harmattan winds. The elders gathered beneath the sacred tree, their faces lined with age and tradition. Elder Okonkwo, his voice like dry leaves, spoke first. "To question our ways is to question the ancestors. A girl's place is known. To stray is to invite ruin." Baba stood among them, his head bowed. He was a father, but he was also a son of tradition. He did not lift his voice in Adanna's defense. That night, as the sky darkened with the promise of a coming storm, Neka pressed a small ivory pendant into Adanna's palm. The carved surface was smooth, worn by time and whispers. "The ancestors speak to those who listen," she murmured, her eyes distant as if she saw beyond the present. Outside, the wind shifted. In the distance, thunder rumbled. A storm was coming. Under the towering baobab tree, where the whispers of ancestors linger in the rustling leaves, Adanna crouched, her fingers tracing the delicate symbols on the scraps of parchment she had hidden away. The moon cast a silver glow upon the worn pages, its light revealing the mysterious markings that traders had brought from distant lands. Each letter was a world unknown, a secret waiting to be unveiled. Beside her, Neka watched, her frail hands folded over her walking staff. Her eyes, though clouded with age, gleamed with knowing. "Knowledge is a seed, child," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Plant it well, and it shall grow into a tree strong enough to withstand any storm." Adanna nodded, drinking in her grandmother's words like the parched earth after the first rains. But deep inside, she knew this seed was forbidden. Kofi stumbled upon the clearing, his face twisting with fury at the sight before him. His sister, a girl poring over forbidden knowledge. His fists clenched as the jealousy in his heart burned hotter than the midday sun. Without a word, he snatched the parchments from Adanna's grasp. She gasped, lunging forward, but it was too late. The fire at the base of the tree crackled hungrily, and within moments the inked letters curled into ash. "You shame us," Kofi hissed, his voice laced with scorn. "This ends now." Before she could speak, his hand clamped around her wrist, dragging her toward the village. The acrid scent of burning parchment filled the air, an omen of trials to come. Under the sacred Iroko tree, the elders sat in a circle, their faces carved with the wisdom of many seasons. The air was thick with murmurs, the flickering torches casting long shadows over the gathering. "The ancestors frown upon such rebellion," Elder Okonkwo declared, his voice like the rumbling earth before a quake. "A girl's place is by the hearth, not in the world of men." Baba stood silent, his hands clenched at his sides. His daughter's defiance was a weight upon his shoulders, yet the words of Neka echoed in his mind. A closed mind breeds storms. Then the chief's verdict fell like an axe upon dry wood. Let her be wed. End this defiance. Adanna's heart pounded like a drum. This could not be her fate. The flames of the evening fires flickered as Adanna knelt before Baba, her eyes fierce with the desperation of one who sees their path slipping away. "Let me honor the ancestors and my mind," she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "Do the spirits not value wisdom?" Baba's expression wavered. For the first time, doubt seeped into his rigid stance. The weight of tradition and love waged war in his chest. The wind shifted suddenly, swirling dust around them in a slow dance. The spirits were listening. But Kofi had not yet finished his schemes. Fear gripped his heart, not for Adanna's soul, but for his own place in their father's legacy. That night, under the cloak of darkness, he crept to the shrine and stole the sacred relics, their golden surfaces gleaming under the moon. With careful hands, he buried them among Adanna's belongings. At dawn, his voice rang through the village like a war horn. "She has defied the ancestors," he cried, pointing an accusatory finger. "She is cursed." Gasps filled the air, shock rippling through the gathered villagers. To defile the sacred was an offense beyond forgiveness. Adanna was dragged before the village square, her wrists bound with coarse rope. The elders stood before her, their faces set in stone. "You have insulted the spirits," Elder Okonkwo thundered. "You shall answer for your sins." Her mother wept silently, turning her face away in shame. The villagers, once filled with curiosity about the girl who longed to learn, now stared at her with fear and scorn. Adanna lifted her chin. She would not bow. She would not break. Then, as the judgment loomed, a cry pierced the silence. Neka collapsed, her frail body crumbling like dried leaves before the wind. Adanna rushed to her side, ignoring the bonds that cut into her wrists. "They fear what they do not understand," Neka whispered, her breath shallow, her grip weak. With the last of her strength, she pressed something into Adanna's palm, the ivory pendant, warm from her touch. "Find the truth in the sacred grove," she murmured. Then, with a sigh as soft as the evening breeze, she was gone. A distant roll of thunder echoed across the sky. The storm had arrived. Dark clouds churned above Kwalu, thick and restless, like a pot of soup on the verge of spilling over. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of impending rain. Thunder growled across the sky, shaking the earth beneath the villagers' feet. Women clutched their children close. Elders murmured in hushed voices, their gazes flickering toward the heavens. "The spirits are angry," Elder Okonkwo muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Baba stood among them, his face carved from stone, yet his heart twisted within him. He had ignored the signs for too long. Now, the ancestors had spoken through the wind, through the restless skies. A howl ripped through the village. Kofi's voice. "She is gone!" he shouted, his breath labored. "Adanna has fled!" The villagers gasped, their fear turning sharp like a blade. Where could she run? And worse, what was she running toward? Rain lashed against the towering trees as Adanna ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The storm roared around her, but she did not stop. Neka's voice echoed in her mind, steady as the roots of the great baobab. Find the truth in the sacred grove. She pushed forward deeper into the forest, guided by an unseen force. The trees stood like ancient sentinels, their bark etched with symbols she had never noticed before. Lightning flashed, illuminating the patterns, circles, lines, stories carved into wood. A history long buried. Then, through the sheets of rain, she saw it. A hidden altar covered in vines, standing as if forgotten by time. She stumbled forward, fingers trembling as she traced the worn carvings. Women. Not just any women. Scholars, healers, leaders. Her breath hitched. The truth was here, carved in stone and wood. The knowledge they had been denied was never a curse. It had once been their legacy. Torches bobbed in the distance, a fiery serpent winding its way through the forest. The villagers came in pursuit, led by Baba and Kofi. Fear and anger mixed in their hearts, driving them forward. "She has angered the spirits," a man shouted. Baba's grip tightened around his staff. His daughter had always been defiant, but had she truly brought this wrath upon them? The crowd emerged into the clearing, their flames illuminating Adanna standing atop the altar. Rain dripped from her hair, her eyes burning with something greater than fear, conviction. "You fear knowledge because you have forgotten our history." Her voice rang through the storm, steady as the heartbeat of the earth. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, uncertainty gnawing at their anger. The storm paused. A hush fell upon the village as a single beam of sunlight pierced through the clouds, falling upon the altar. The carvings shimmered under its glow, and in Adanna's palm, Neka's pendant pulsed with light. A soft click echoed in the clearing. The villagers gasped as a hidden panel at the altar creaked open, revealing a darkened chamber. Scrolls, brittle with age, lay inside, proof of what had been lost. Baba fell to his knees, his breath stolen from his chest. The truth lay before him, undeniable. Kofi trembled beside him, his jealousy crumbling beneath the weight of his lies. The chief stepped forward, his aged fingers brushing over the scrolls. His voice, filled with reverence, broke the silence. "We have blinded ourselves to our own legacy." The wind carried whispers of change as the villagers stood, shaken but awakened. The storm had passed. In its place, the golden light of dawn stretched across the land. Baba turned to Adanna, his eyes lined with regret. He reached out. "Forgive me, my child." Adanna met his gaze, her heart swelling with something close to hope. The chief raised his hand, addressing the village. "We have walked in darkness for too long, but no more. Today, we reclaim what was lost." And so, under the watchful eyes of the ancestors, a new story began. Baba stood before the gathered village, his once proud shoulders slumped under the weight of revelation. The firelight flickered across his weathered face, casting deep shadows that mirrored the sorrow in his heart. He turned to Adanna, his daughter, the child he had tried so hard to silence, and his voice trembled like the leaves in the evening breeze. "I was blinded by fear," he murmured, his throat thick with emotion. "I thought I was protecting you, protecting our way, but it was I who was lost." His knees met the dust as he knelt before her, the action breaking more than just his pride. It shattered the chains of generations-old beliefs. "Forgive me, Adanna." A hush settled over the villagers, many watching with wide eyes. A father kneeling before his daughter. It was unheard of. Yet in that moment the old world crumbled, making way for the new. With a solemn nod, Baba stood, his grip firm as he took Adanna's hands in his. "You will go to school. You will learn. And when you return, you will teach us what we have forgotten." The weight of shame bore heavily upon Kofi as he stood at the edge of the field, his hands coated in the earth he had once dismissed. His betrayal had almost cost Adanna her future, yet she had not turned away from him. The guilt in his heart was a burden, but now he sought redemption. With slow, deliberate movements, he knelt and pressed the first seed into the soil. One seed, then another. Sweat trickled down his brow as he worked, each handful of earth a silent plea for forgiveness. The elders stood watching in silence, their expressions unreadable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues over the land, a small figure approached. It was Adanna. She knelt beside him, picking up a seed. "You do not have to do this alone," she said softly. Kofi's throat tightened. He had wronged her, yet she stood by him. With a nod, he continued his work, and slowly, other villagers joined. What had once been scorched earth would soon bloom again, a symbol of renewal, a testament to change. The chief stood atop the village's central platform, his gaze sweeping across his people. He had watched the storm of the past days with cautious eyes, had seen truths unearthed and wounds laid bare. But from the wreckage, something new had emerged. "This village has long held to its ways, fearing what lies beyond," he said, his voice steady. "But fear is not our path. Knowledge was once our strength, and it will be again." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the chief raised his staff. "A school will be built, here, within these walls. The children of our people will learn not only the ways of our ancestors, but also the wisdom of the world beyond." A murmur of astonishment turned into cheers. From the far villages, word spread. Scholars arrived carrying scrolls of wisdom and stories of lands far beyond the horizon. And at the heart of it all stood Adanna, her eyes gleaming with purpose. Under the great baobab tree, she gathered the children, her voice weaving lessons into stories, blending the old with the new. She spoke of ancestors and of the future, of knowledge and its power, and the children listened. The village thrived in ways it had never known. Under the light of the evening fires, Adanna sat among the villagers, the same place where Neka had once told her stories. Now it was her voice that carried through the night, her hands tracing the wisdom in the dirt, her words binding the past to the present. "A tree cannot grow if its roots are cut," she said, her voice steady. "We must honor those who came before us, but we must also grow towards the sky." The elders nodded. The younger ones leaned in closer, and the children's eyes shone with wonder. The circle of wisdom continued, stronger than before. The past had not been erased, but instead it had been reclaimed, rewritten with new ink upon the fabric of time. Years passed, and the village's story did not end. It only continued, like the endless flow of a river. On a day of celebration, under the gaze of a new dawn, Adanna's daughter stood before the village. A healer now, her hands carried both the wisdom of herbs and the knowledge of books. At her side, Baba stood, his back straighter, his hair now touched with age, but his spirit lighter than it had ever been. To deny a child's mind is to silence the ancestors, he proclaimed. Let no child in this village be denied their right to learn. And with those words, the circle continued. The ivory pendant once worn by Neka now passed into new hands, a symbol of knowledge, of strength, of the never-ending power of stories. For in the heart of Africa, where the ancestors whisper in the winds, stories are never lost. They are only waiting to be told again. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the village, the echoes of Adanna's journey remained, etched not just in the hearts of her people, but in the spirit of all who listened. Her story was not just one of defiance, but of wisdom, change, and the unbreakable will to honor the past while shaping the future. But stories like this should not be forgotten. To keep the heartbeat of African tales alive, viewers are encouraged to like this video and subscribe to the Heartbeat Tales. Each story carries lessons from the ancestors, wisdom that deserves to be shared. With every subscription, a new tale unfolds. With every like, the voices of the past grow stronger. And now, the question lingers. What lesson from Adanna's journey speaks to you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, for storytelling is not just in the telling, but in the listening and remembering. New stories await, filled with courage, betrayal, redemption, and the whispers of the spirits. Don't miss the next legend waiting to be told.